Welcome to our regular fourth Thursday from Resilience to Restoration Public Zoom. We're so thankful that in the heat of the summer, when I know y'all have other things you could be doing, that you've chosen to be here with us tonight and to hear our wonderful guest speakers on this topic of air pollution, environmental health, and environmental justice. I'd like to just briefly introduce our two special guests. For that, I better put on my glasses so that I can read it. Dr. Mellinger-Birdsong earned an MD from Eastern Virginia Medical School, completed a pediatrics residency at Hershey Medical Center of the Pennsylvania State University, and earned an MPH from Johns Hopkins University. She has worked in areas as diverse as communicable diseases, vaccine preventable diseases, radiation environmental health, environmental public health, asthma, a county STD clinic, county tuberculosis clinic, and a Native American Indian Health Service clinic, as well as air pollution and climate environmental health. We also welcome Julian Harden. Julian joined the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, SACE, in 2023 as the Clean Energy Coordinator. Julian's focus is promoting equitable access to clean energy efficiency, and electric transportation, devoting his time to where the most urgent needs and opportunities exist. Being based in Atlanta, he also adds additional capacity to SACE's work in the Peach State. And I'm going to paste a link here because, as you might imagine, he's got a lot more credits to his name, and that's the abbreviated version. I've got it to waiting room list. There we go. So you're welcome to read more about Julian there. Welcome, Dr. Birdsong and Julian. Dr. Birdsong, if you wouldn't mind leading us off.
Okay. Is that working for everybody?
Yep.
So I'm talking about air pollution and health justice and environmental justice. Because actually air pollution has a big effect on a lot of health that we don't usually think about. But first I want to start off, this first slide is about normal healthy air. And it's just, we see the air, it looks clear, but there's all these molecules bouncing around in it. And these purple ones are nitrogen, and it's just two nitrogen atoms together. And there are more than 3/4 of the air. And then oxygen are these little turquoise ones, and they're about 1/5 of the air. Between the two of them, they make up 99% of the air, and everything else is 1%. All the other things. But we also have CO2 that comes from people and animals breathing, and also CO2 that we make, and water from streams and rivers and trees and etc., rain, ponds. Wait, is this? Okay. So how do we get air pollution in the air? So when we burn anything, methane or natural gas, wood or candles or gasoline, diesel fuel, biofuel, biodiesel, wood chips, anything we burn combines with oxygen to make CO2. And whenever you have anything hot enough with nitrogen and oxygen around, they combine and make nitrogen dioxide. I'll go over the health effects of these later. And then because we're burning things, we make particles, like you're used to seeing a candle make soot. Sometimes if it's not burning right, you can see a stream going up. And air toxins or volatile organic compounds, which come from whatever is burning. So if you're burning diesel, you'll get certain kind of VOCs. And if you're doing gasoline or whatever, it's partly stuff that gets through unburned and part stuff that is incompletely burned and partly just a residual of the burning. So cars and trucks and buses burn fuel, and they go around all over, and they make exhaust wherever they go. So they're putting air pollution everywhere there's a road. People inside the vehicle and nearby can breathe that exhaust. And then we have stationary sources like factories or pipelines or pipes, and even inside houses, stoves and household products can leak or evaporate or release gases. Especially pipelines leak a lot more than we give them credit for. So these are, for outdoor air, some of the four main kinds of air pollution. So nitrogen oxides happen whenever there's any kind of flame or burning in the air, just because of the heat from the flame. And that affects our heart and lungs. And then we have volatile organic compounds. I don't know, my little Zoom thing's in the way. Anyway, we call those VOCs. And there are a bunch of different carbon chemicals. And they come from petroleum products mostly, and also anything that can evaporate that's organic. Organic means it's got carbon in it. So factories or refineries, or even if your fuel tank is, like as you put your the gas thing in the fuel tank of the car, and you can see little wavy lines coming out and smell the gas. That's a VOC getting in the air. And then we have particles, and this one is a EPA electron microscope of the diesel particles, and they're really, really teeny. This bar here is 1 micrometer, which is a millionth of a meter, or about 0.0004004 of an inch. So it's really teeny, and they're so small they can get, when you breathe them in, they get in your lungs and can go straight into your bloodstream. They don't just stick there. Like when you breathe in a piece of pollen, your airway catches it and you cough it back out. Sorry. And then this one is not from diesel. This is from a phosphorus plant, but it shows this bright spots here are mercury that was in with the fuel and got attached to this particle. And that can happen with anything, whether it's mercury or lead or arsenic. All these particles coming off from a power plant, or if there's contamination in a diesel fuel, can be on the particles, and then you're breathing it in and getting it in your body that way. A lot of these will settle near, and we'll get stuff in our streams and rivers, but you can breathe it in straight, and that's also bad. And then ozone is not directly made from exhaust. It's a secondary reaction. It's a chemical reaction that happens in the air. So you have oxygen that's normally there, and then we have all our exhausts, the nitrogen oxides and the VOCs, and they all get together, and the sunlight and the heat make them turn into ozone. So that's why when it's hot in the summer, you get a lot more ozone, and you don't get it much in the winter because the heat makes the reaction go. So if we can keep cars and trucks and keep them clean and keep our power plants having clean energy, we can get rid of this part of the chemical reaction. All we'll have is oxygen, and we won't have ozone around anymore. And then I'm just talking a bit about climate change, because clean energy, it's all related. The air pollution, most of the air pollutants are also greenhouse gases. And burning fossil fuels is making both air pollution that damages our health directly and makes climate change. And so carbon dioxide, methane, or natural gas, nitrogen oxides, and fluoromolecules, which we use as refrigerants, like in our air conditioners, and as propellants. If you ever use a spray can, some of them have hydrofluorocarbons. And the climate change, what happens is normally we have the sun comes in and some of it gets reflected off by the water or the ice or whatever. When we have this nice blanket of greenhouse gases, it gets trapped. Instead of going back in space, it comes back in and warms the earth and the ocean. And that is bringing us floods and droughts, wildfires, heat waves. It affects agriculture. A lot of farmers around the world are already noticing it, and much more. It can affect where mosquitoes go and bring different infectious diseases. So then I'll just go over cars and trucks. Cars mostly use gasoline, which burns a little bit cleaner than diesel, but it still makes pollution. Cars have catalytic converters on them and other tools to help trap the unburned gas and put it back in the fuel tank. So it reduces pollution, but it doesn't get rid of it. So we still have carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide. This is the one that's why you shouldn't have a car running in your garage with the garage door closed, because it will kill you after a while. Particulates and VOCs. Trucks use diesel. There's some filters on them and catalytic converters to reduce the pollution, but it doesn't get rid of all of it. And it doesn't trap any of the gases. We have CO2 and NO2 and all these VOCs and particulates, and again, carbon monoxide. And school buses are mostly diesel, so they're basically like trucks. A few of them use propane, but that still is a fossil fuel and it's still making CO2 and it's still being burned, so it makes nitrogen dioxide, not as much as diesel, but it still makes some. And the thing with the school bus right here, the engine can leak a lot of the air pollution from the engine, and then it will waft right in as the bus is driving along. It gets into the air system and gets inside the bus. So it's not just the tailpipe that's leaking pollution, it's all the way along from the engine and underneath the bus. And diesel exhaust contains over 40 chemicals, including carbon particles or black carbon, and then all these VOCs. But I want to point out two of them, benzene or formaldehyde, are known carcinogens. And then there's all these other ones that we know are bad, but we haven't proven it yet. And people have done measurements inside a school bus, and the pollution level can be 4 to 15 times higher than if you were standing right in front of the bus, just from it being sucked in. And there's a study they did here in Georgia of all the counties in Georgia, and they found that riding a diesel school bus affected children's test scores. And also we have what's called a fitness gram, where they do some tests in their PE classes. And so it affects their aerobic capacity. They can't run the mile as fast, things like that. And that's just from riding a school bus is damaging their lungs and making them not able to do as much exercise. And then this is where the environmental health and justice comes in. So who live near highways? The interstate system was planned in the 1950s when redlining was still legal, and the highways were built through the middle of or right next to Black communities. And you can see right here, there's apartments right here, and then other single family houses. And it's like that all over. There's neighborhoods all around this interchange. And I'm sure during rush hour, this one's really jammed, just like they are everywhere. And all these people are right next to the highway getting all that pollution over them. But shoot, sorry. Right now, the Department of Transportation is trying to fix this, and there's some grant money with applications due in September. So I put it here, and I can put it in the chat for everybody once I'm done talking, if people are interested. It starts off helping communities plan what to do, and then there will be more grants to try and help fix it. And then this is Reverend Malcolm took this photo. It's another polluting power plant. This one runs on wood chips, and there's where the burner is. But all this smoke, this community was here first, and they decided they would just be fine putting this plant right next to where people were living. And then this other one is actually a study. They measured the pollution level in neighborhoods. I'm gonna escape out of this. Can you guys see that graph? If you move your little zoom bar around, or should? Oh, that doesn't work. All right, I'm gonna go back.
We see the graph, the bar graph.
Okay. So they measured a bunch of cities, 202 different maps that were drawn in the 1930s, and then they went and measured the air pollution in all the different areas. And they found that the green areas, which is where white people were, had much less pollution than the red areas, which is where Black people were made to live. And that matches the oral stories that we're getting from what everybody knows. Shoot. Now I can't find this. My Zoom bar is right over the thing to go back. There I go. So anyway, there are a lot of studies that show the same thing, but I thought this one was pretty obvious. You don't have to be a scientist to see there's less in the green and more in the red. Now, all right. And then this is a similar study that shows that temperature based on, and this is just in the areas where we have the maps from. This is national, where the green areas are cooler than the red areas where Black people were forced to live. And it's true, if you divide up the country, you know, every area, Midwest, the Northeast, the West, and the South. The West is actually looks more of a difference than any other part of the country. And it can be as much as 7, like Portland, Oregon has got a 7-degree difference between the Black and white neighborhoods. And this same study found that it was because of some of the contributing thing was the amount of trees that were in a neighborhood, that the white areas had more trees and that provided shade and kept the pavement and roofs from getting so hot. And the Black areas had more highways and buildings. And then this is what, oh dang it, sorry, that's so sensitive. Air pollution does for children. So if a mom is exposed while she's pregnant, it can increase the risk of low birth weight, premature birth. It affects brain development after the child is born and is linked to autism. It also causes asthma attacks in children with asthma, and there's actually studies that show it increases the risk of asthma, even in teenagers who play sports outside a polluted area that never had asthma before can get it. It damages children's lungs so that by the time they're done, you think about a kid growing, they have the teen growth spurt, they grow a lot, their ribs grow and the lungs grow just to match that same amount of growth. And it keeps their lungs from growing as big, which could lead to problems when they're 40 or 50 years old. It affects kids' blood pressure. It affects their ability to learn in school and exercise. And also it's linked to mental stress and mental health problem in children. And a lot of this is similar, but we see more of it in adults because there's had time to accumulate all the damage. It affects heart disease, heart attacks, heart failure, which is where the heart can't pump enough. And there's actually a study that shows that 8% of all heart disease deaths are due to air pollution. That's in the US or the North America. And then it also is linked with high blood pressure, diabetes, kidney damage, a lot of cancers, asthma attacks. It makes emphysema worse, and COPD attacks, and it increases the risk for pneumonia and viral infection. And that's true for children too. So like if you can have just one wave of smoke come through, and then in the next 3 weeks, both the adults and kids will show up in the ER having more infections because the smoke damaged their lungs and made it easier to get infection. And it's very strongly linked with strokes and dementia. And it also affects adults' mental health care. And then this is similar to who is more affected by air pollution are more exposed. The same thing is true with climate change. The people in floodplains are more prone to having trouble. Obviously, when there's a flood, a storm comes through and dumps too much rain, and both our zoning and our economic system make it more likely that, and the redlining, that will be Black people who are forced to live in floodplains. The same with heat. People in neighborhoods with fewer trees and more buildings get more heat, and that really affects health, heart disease, and asthma and breathing. And extreme weather and disasters, people who've been excluded from the economic system by systemic racism don't have the resources to flee and are dependent on, like what happened in New Orleans after Katrina. They all were in the Superdome, which really got hit hard. And this is globally, this is from Oxfam, and it's just a good graph. It shows the richest 10% make more than half of the greenhouse gases, but only suffer 10% of the effects, whereas the poorest 50% only make about 10% of the greenhouse gases, but are getting half the effects. And that's true nationwide. But this is a good, I thought, a good pictorial that shows who's making it and who's getting the effects. But the good news is, with air pollution, when we clean up the air, health improves. Within weeks, there's people have less phlegm, cough, or shortness of breath. There's children who are in school more, they're not being absent from school. People are healthy, they don't have to go to the doctor as much. They're not in the being hospitalized, but they're out able to live their lives and be healthy and thrive. And this, we did actually during the Olympics for 2 weeks, when the Olympics were here in 1996, they scared everybody into staying home or else telecommuting or going on vacation. So we had a lot less traffic. And just for those 2 weeks, our rate of children's asthma admissions went down. And then once the Olympics was over, our traffic volume went right back up and the asthma went right back up. So we know that it affects health right away. And the same thing, we have the other good news about climate change is we have a lot of tools right now, clean energy, which Julian will talk about, and clean transportation to help address that. So it's not doom and gloom. We have solutions and a lot of them are being implemented. So that's the end of my talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Birdsong. And as you've already alluded, we don't like talking about problems without talking about solutions. And so the next half is going to focus on solutions to these problems. And we welcome Julian Harden from Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Hi, thank you guys for having me. And that was a really great presentation. I really love that breakdown, especially as we get into the issues that we can all solve and that mean the most to us, especially as people that live in these areas, that are impacted by climate change. And so I want to turn your attention to my presentation. And so first things first, I'm part of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. And we are an organization that's fighting, that's promoting for equitable access for energy choices to ensure a clean and safe, healthy community. And that includes all our states in our region. So that's Georgia, that's the Carolinas, that's Tennessee and Florida. And you know, we love the communities we live in, but we also know there are solutions to very real problems. First things first, I want to talk about is electric school busing. So recently, especially in Georgia, which I'm based in, there was the rollout of new zero emission school busing in Georgia. And this was in the Atlanta area in Clayton County. Now, one of the best things about this is that this is part of a federal initiative that's been part of the new federal initiatives, such as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that puts much needed funding into clean energy infrastructure, and just getting the ball rolling on things that can really help areas that are suffering with being overborne with pollution, to limit that exposure. And so one of the big things was electric school busing. And so electric school busing, the first things first, people will ask, like, why is this needed, and what is the importance of this? Well, first thing is the link between electric school busing and environmental justice. For one thing, we know is that it is a fact that low-income communities, communities of color, are overburdened with pollution, and that they often lack a lot of the material to really escape that, and unfortunately bear the brunt of things like climate change and harmful emissions that they breathe. And so what we have is, especially for our children, kids are now being able to see firsthand that that there are steps and solutions to solve this, or to at least get ahead of it. So one of the ways is zero emission school busing. Now, I'm sure, like many of you here, I'm not the only one who took a school bus in the morning. Wake up in those early mornings and had to catch a bus. I'm definitely not only one. And so one of the things that I remember was that long tail of diesel fuel coming out at the back, and seemingly blocking out other cars or traffic in the distance. And especially as someone who had asthma, like I did, I had to be extremely careful about when I had to go near a school bus to not breathe in that toxic material. And so, especially living in a community like I did, a very working class and low-income community, it wasn't much, but it's what we had. And so, one thing that this does is two-pronged: is that one, it addresses the issues of communities suffering disproportionately from environmental hazards such as pollution, and breathing in harmful emissions, especially in communities of color that previously were overburdened by that. That is a big help. Also, children with respiratory issues, and stated in the last presentation, many kids do develop asthma and other respiratory issues, and that makes things, of course, a lot harder when you had to be a lot more careful, and understanding that even the air that you breathe can be toxic, and so in this rollout of new school busing is really going to be a benefit for a lot of these communities. Now, especially as we get just speaking more about Justice 40. So Justice 40, of course, is an initiative by the federal government to give 40% of benefits to these underprivileged communities. And for example, I myself do live in the Justice 40 community just outside of Atlanta. And the interesting thing about this is that when we look at why is this needed, and especially in the context of Atlanta, some areas that are overburdened pollution that are also low-income communities are a lot hotter than their suburban and than their suburban counterparts, partially because one, lack of tree access that was highlighted earlier, but also because of harmful emissions. And we know that we do live in especially in a very codependent society that releases a lot of toxins to the air, and also especially considering it's hot and how hot it is here, can lead to a lot of health issues down the line. Now, addressing that further, the rollout of both Bill and IRA make the possibility of getting this type of infrastructure into communities that need it the most. And so the Justice 40 initiative by this administration really puts money to the movement that a lot of organizations have been talking about. We want that infrastructure to make sure that our communities that we've lived in for my son's generations are properly served and are not left behind, especially with this new wave of new green infrastructure and new clean energy technologies. Now, going further, we also look at Bill and IRA. And so Bill and IRA, especially when we look at the solution for clean energy, it goes not just with electric busing, but also in terms of weatherization updates to your home. And so whether that means being able to, invest in new solar panels or just make sure that your home is sustainable, that is now possible. And for those who are, of course, are more nervous or anxious about getting involved and looking and understanding IRA and justice and IRA and bill, it's another way of furthering and also just ensuring that these communities are not left out or not left out in terms of these terms of legislation, but also just make sure that they have a voice and that these communities now have a stake in their future, especially as we go back to electric school busing. That those communities that previously didn't have the opportunity or didn't have the that weren't seen as areas to invest and were in fact had issues of de-investment, now have the ability to say, we that these problems that have persisted for a long time can now be tackled in a way that best supports and uplifts the community, because that's what we want most of all, is to uplift these communities and to give them a voice, that they previously might not have felt they had. And so especially as you go to Bill and IRA, now the Inflation Reduction Act is, one thing that's great that it does is that it really tackles the issues of climate change head on, and that it's able to not only say climate change is a problem, but as we previously said, what are solutions to that problem that we can take on and ensure that these areas have the means to curb a lot of these issues such as pollution and issues of climate change such as global warming. And so what we want to see as time goes on is more progress in community engagement in terms of how can we get involved with funding from Bill and IRA. What are issues that directly affect us that we can that funds from these government programs can possibly help? And one thing I do want to add is that what that makes these these legislation special is that cities can also apply for this. So if states such as Georgia, for example, don't want to accept federal funds, now cities such as Atlanta can also apply. And I, being an Atlanta native, taking advantage of a lot of these opportunities is really significant for a majority African Americans and low income residents of cities that probably didn't think that they will receive such attention, and they were able to get that money to hopefully the people that most need it. So especially when cities can now get involved instead of getting money from the states just getting the funds, cities are now able to put in a community focused approach, possibly to help the area. So if the state of Alabama doesn't want to take the funds, then Birmingham or Mobile or Miami, Orlando that are in Florida can also take advantage. It's all about making sure that these different areas have the opportunity to take advantage of a massive windfall in climate in funds that are seeking to curb the effects of climate change. And finally, especially as we get further into the funding, as more areas and communities take advantage of the funding, it's important to remember that this is going to take a ton of community engagement, and that especially as we go on, that these communities, especially the communities that have seen disinvestment, feel like they're heard and they have a stake at the table. And that is something that my organization says when we go to these communities, that we want to make sure that you have a voice and that you can use it. And especially as we've seen with electric busing, those areas that have been traditionally disinvested now have a voice and are able to now have those issues that they previously had tackled and feel like they've really had an impact. And so that's what I want to leave with you guys. And again, thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Julian. We are so glad to have both of you here tonight, and we've got plenty of time for folks and our audience to ask questions, or if y'all have commentary for one another. We'd like to start the dialogue. Both are welcome to type questions in the chat, or we're a small cozy crew here tonight. Feel free to come off mute and ask your question directly.
Hey, this is Kate. I actually had is it Anne? I had a question for Anne first. I'm wondering, I saw an article recently about car pollution, but it was actually in regards to the tire particles and brake particles that, come off like during driving. That's actually more harmful for us to breathe in than the actual exhaust. And I was just wondering if you had any, direct knowledge of that or data on that, comparing.
It's
that.
There's not as much of it as from the exhausts, and with the exhausts floating everywhere, the asphalt and the brake stuff tends to stay right near the highway. So it again is an EJ thing because highways were built in Black communities. But it is a reason. That's why transit and getting more people into buses or non-car kinds of transportation is a good solution, because we still have, even if we're all electric vehicles, we still have miles of asphalt everywhere. And the best thing is to try and get into walking or even scooters or anything that gets you out of a car is probably better. And the other thing, electric vehicles, because they use the engine and regenerate, they don't make as much of the brake dust as regular cars. So they brake with the regeneration, and it's not using brake pads. I don't really, I don't understand it, but I know they make less.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess to either of you, I'm just wondering, and this is, I guess, as far as the state of Georgia, because I know they've been more progressive than Alabama in a lot of ways, as far as like renewable energy, like solar. And I'm just wondering, have you heard anything from like the city of Atlanta or certain counties like wanting to, invest more in electric infrastructure as far as like charging stations, just anything that might, the electric buses, like, making things more accessible to people. Because I think still it's a problem of like the cost right now for most people. They can't afford an electric vehicle. And then there's always the argument. I literally got an argument today with somebody on Facebook, unfortunately, about, not enough charging stations. And then they're arguing about how recyclable the parts are, that's bad for the environment, the mining and all of that. So, which is true. We're not where we should be yet on the recycling of the parts and the metals, and that needs to be done. And then, mining more ethically and sustainably long term if we do have to mine for those metals in the future. But yeah, I just see a lot of that in like the public dialogue. Like there's still a lot of doubt in investing in electric vehicles. And I just wonder how I know the science behind all of this, like, and I understand and I believe it. I think it's just making these things more accessible to people where they can see that it's possible to do and that it makes sense long term.
Yeah,
So,
we definitely need to make sure that the mining is done ethically and not exploiting people, but we also know that continuing to do the fossil fuels is creating what we have now. And the more we add to the atmosphere, the worse it will get. So it's not like a either or, it's like, which is less bad. And hopefully we can get to a really good future where it's almost all clean. And that's why, like, transit and buses, you can move more people with less batteries. And so that's a really good solution for cities where there's enough density to have good bus and transit. Like, before I moved here 30 years ago, I lived in Philadelphia and they had a whole train system that went everywhere. The whole city used the train system. It wasn't like, in Atlanta, MARTA only goes 4 directions. But, we had a good system, and we had rings. Each city had, the bicycle wheel, not just spokes, but having connections between different areas. So you didn't have to go downtown and then back out again. You could just go straight there. Would be good.
oh, sure. Like, I agree. I
else?
hate driving, and like, I wish Alabama and Birmingham and Atlanta, even though I'm not in Atlanta, but I mean, it's the same problem of like the infrastructure is not there for public transportation as far as like a wide scale solution to driving. And I don't know how you pass that as far as like people, like our state senators and our governor and our local officials, like investing money in those things, because they keep saying, there's no way, it's too expensive to do it on a wide scale. I mean, you can put buses on the road, but nobody takes the buses here because there's like a stigma behind taking a bus anywhere, and it's too slow and it's not efficient. And so yeah, I've definitely had that argument with a lot of people, and like I totally agree that fossil fuels are not the way to go, and they hurt people anyway. So I mean, yeah, it's like, which is the worst
I
of the
think some of that is actually some of it is important to think about, but I think some of it is being amplified by the fossil fuel companies that don't want us to switch, and they make it feel like you're paralyzed and you can't do anything. And like what Julian was talking about with houses, with doing the insulation and weatherization, that immediately cuts. If you can reduce your fuel use for your house by 30%, that's like putting a good number of solar panels on. But all you had to do was put in some insulation and caulk the windows and seal things off. And so that's another good way to go with houses and buildings. But the thing, like, if you're thinking about the brakes and asphalt, we're gonna have that whether we have electric or cars, and we still need to have cleaner. If we have gasoline cars, we're still making all that exhaust that's killing us, and it causes, the studies show that the particulates from fossil fuels cause 13% of all deaths in the US. And then the NO2, which also comes from fossil fuel, adds another 1.5%. So that's almost like 1 in 7 deaths are coming directly from fossil fuels. And so it's a lot. And there are some problems with EV, but they're not as much as we get from fossil fuels.
Yeah, and I guess to add on that is that, especially being an Atlanta native, when you look at funding, I'm just saying, so for the Inflation Reduction Act, local, I mean, especially when the fact that it's now local governments can now apply for money. Now, I know you're talking about Birmingham not, I guess, being as, I guess, forthcoming when it comes to adopting this kind of funding. I mean, it really is on local governments to reach out to like other jurisdictions, both regionally, locally, and to like really engage in those private sectors to facilitate that clean energy production, whether it be clean buses, clean truck, or clean transportation, as we've seen with electric busing, school busing. And so, especially living in the South, like for example, Atlanta has with their leadership, has tried to put in a lot more electric busing in their fleet, exchanging out the diesel ones, even though it has been slow for a lot of climate activists. I think it's just, especially that's what I mean by community engagement. Especially being at my organization, SACE, we have to make sure that communities understand that this is available, and if this is something that they really want, then you can really push these cities to act. We've been in states that are more traditionally skeptical of climate, but once they see that it's not just a bunch of rich people driving Teslas, it's people that want to save money in their homes. It's people that want to save on their energy bills and also want to, like, living in the South. We like, especially when it comes to this heat, want to make sure their health is protected. And so once you get into that kind of community engagement and the community is really pushing and rallying for this kind of change, then I feel like you'll get some of the more grassroots opportunities to get more clean energy policies passed, and these local governments starting to be more active in receiving these funds for clean energy policies that really best serve the community as a whole.
Yeah, Kyle, this is Kate again. I'm just wondering, I mean, you're familiar with the Birmingham area. I'm just wondering, for example, like we just got a big HUD grant to redevelop a poorer neighborhood here. It's like $50 million. So basically, our mayor, I mean, it seems like, I mean, he's progressive, but at the same time, like his focus is not on sustainability. His focus is not on climate change. So I'm just wondering, we're focused on infrastructure as far as like housing, infrastructure, and then safety, like, because we have issues with that. So I'm wondering, Kyle, I mean, how do you steer people's view and say, like, we can focus on both things? Like, can you walk and chew gum at the same time? Like, can we focus on safety and climate change? Can we focus on more than one type of infrastructure from a city standpoint? Because there are organizations like Cool Green Trees that are going around and planting trees in areas that have no green space, basically. And so that's like a grassroots nonprofit that got funding, federal funding to do that. And that's awesome. But just on like a larger scale, to impact on a larger scale, I'm just wondering, like, what your thoughts are as far as, trying to influence our city government, or, the state of Alabama, to focus on those things.
That's a great question. And, first off, I probably should recuse myself because I actually live in Shelby County, where now our office is in Avondale, Birmingham proper. But I'd actually like to kick it back to our speakers, because this was something I wanted to ask them. So, we've heard that there's grants available to do wonderful things. And we've heard of the benefits of electric vehicles. So, clearly folks need to be purchasing and using electric vehicles or hybrids. But, even better, walking and avoiding the use of cars. But what would y'all say is are the top three things that folks like us here in Birmingham that are fighting an uphill battle, as are y'all in Atlanta? Although y'all are ahead of us, as we have noted. What are three things average citizens here can do to improve our air and environmental justice?
I would say the first thing is, first and foremost, just you want to be able to get together as a community, because it all starts at the grassroots level. You want to be able to, it's great to express these issues as an individual, but once you start to open it up as a wider community, then you have more people that all say, yeah, this is something that is important to us. and we want improvements, and we want policies that feel like they would improve our lives. And so I would say, first and foremost, get together as a community and really engage for that. The second thing is that, of course, you want to know who your local you want to know who your local leadership is and hold them accountable. So if, say, for example, I think Kate said that, I think the mayor of Birmingham may not care about climate or sustainability. And then especially that's something that that said person that you feel like needs to pay attention to, then you have to make sure you got to bring that to the forefront. I mean, especially if you can say that this is something that not paying attention to sustainability and climate change is something that's actively that's negatively impacting your community and people around you, then that's something you got to bring up and hold them accountable for. And I would say there's a gnat in here. I would say the third thing is when you're trying to push for these things is make sure that you are giving yourself that you are seeing yourself as stakeholders. And what I mean by that is that you have to actively see yourself that someone that has a stake in this state or this city's future. I mean, if you don't see yourself as a stakeholder, then you're not really highlighting that you do hold weight in that what happens in the future of this community. So first thing is community engagement. Second thing is holding your local representatives accountable. And third thing is see yourself as a stakeholder. And also, I'm cheating. This is probably a fourth thing. If you have especially any organizations that's nearby that are pushing for this, collaborate. I mean, collaboration is a big thing. You have to get out and talk to them. Maybe they can show any tips or come to your community and show more the benefits to people who are more skeptical. But that collaboration is going to be critical. So those are the things I would say that are most important in terms of in changing that. And listen, I mean, in this kind of work, you lose more than you win because you're doing an uphill battle, especially where you're at. But don't let that discourage you. Even small victories, especially where we live in, that could be a big victory from someone else that has never felt that kind of investment. So those are the things. I'm sorry I cheated a little bit with those number of answers, but yeah, those are
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julian.
That's good. Yeah, because I don't know. I mean, I talk about the health effects, and the thing, I don't know that I could rank which three things are the most important. But I know, like, cities can pass ordinance, make it so there's community solar. So even if people live in rental housing, you can have a community solar program so that, they can't decide, put it on their roof, but they can have it as a neighborhood or a community and take advantage of that way. And there's things like that, which probably ceases more with the nuts and bolts of installing it. But I would just emphasize, it's causing people to have heart attacks. It's causing them to be sick and miss work, which affects the economy. There's a study in Europe that found that for every euro they spent on reducing the particle pollution, they got 100 to 200 euros in economic benefits. So it didn't cost, it actually boosted GDP because it affects kids learning in school, which affects what they do lifelong. It affects worker health. They were spending less on health expenses, and it affects productivity. They just can't think as well. So they were not working as fast. Outdoor workers get sick more, have to take more rest breaks when it's too hot. And it affects work absences. So the big improvement in productivity just from reducing the pollution is a real boon to the economy, and it doesn't cost. But it's hard, we just have to keep saying that over and over. And eventually it might sink into the people that are opposed to it.
Thank you both so much. We are approaching the top of the hour, and I want to honor everybody's time. Again, thank you for choosing to be here with us tonight. And in the shameless self-plug category, I'll add one more thing. As Dr. Birdsong is with the Breathe Again Collaborative, Julian is with Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and we, of course, are the People's Justice Council, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light. And just this is from Resilience to Restoration. I haven't said anything about that project tonight, but this is a project that's directly related to positive change, and we've got a program under that from Resilience to Restoration umbrella that we call We Rise, weatherizing every residence in the Southeast, and weatherization energy is just a vital part of the solution. So please support the organization of choice. I know some of you out there are affiliated with other organizations. Please feel free to list them in the chat. As we wrap it up, got 3 minutes, so I'll give folk one last hurrah for a last minute question, comment. Again, want to thank our wonderful speakers. Hearing none, enjoy the rest of your evening. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you.